I'm Mayo with the Calgary Journal, and today I'm speaking with Serge Fenyuk as a part of Newcomers to the City, a collaboration project with the Calgary Local Immigration Partnership, also known as CLIP. To get us started, would you mind telling me when you moved to Calgary? Or to Canada in general, I suppose?
I moved to Canada in '99, um, but I came to Calgary in 2013. I lived in Edmonton and Saskatoon before.
Great. And where did you move to Canada from?
I'm originally from Ukraine.
Okay. And what brought you to the city? Or to Canada, I guess.
So I came to Canada because in 1990s there was an opportunity to attend an international students program in Catholic school system of Saskatoon, and they had an arrangement kind of like an exchange, except there was nobody that went to Ukraine. So I basically came and studied for grade 10, 11, and 12, and lived with a Canadian family that provided room and board and made sure I didn't get in trouble.
Very nice. So this interview is part of a project called Newcomers. Do you consider yourself a newcomer to Canada even after nearly 25 years of living here?
I wouldn't identify myself as a newcomer. I would say I'm an immigrant. Um, I have an accent, and I lived for 15 years in a different country. But over half of my life is in Canada. So I'm a hybrid.
I totally understand that. I myself am also an immigrant. I came here from the States when I was 16. Uh, Now, what would you say was the greatest challenge you faced in moving here?
So at the time, the most difficult thing was to integrate in Canadian culture and Canadian society. Um, it was kind of like I didn't realize it consciously at the time, but now in the rearview mirror, I see that it's to figure out the social contract, to understand what people expect, and how back and forth interactions go. Like Anglo-Saxon culture, Canadian, American, English, they have a style of communication that's indirect, whereas in East Europe, it's a lot more straightforward. If I think that something is stupid, I'm gonna say it's stupid, kind of like that. So so that was a challenge, and also being at quite a young age and dealing with um, teenagehood and figuring out oneself and uh, and then that was another layer that was added. So yeah, assimilation and integration in society, understanding what it's about and my place in it.
For sure, yeah. So previously you said that you lived in Saskatoon and Edmonton. So why did you end up choosing to live in Calgary over other cities in Canada?
So I met my common law partner at the moment, and she got a job here. And these jobs that she has are hard to find, and she has taken it, and I followed her.
That's so sweet.
Otherwise, I liked Edmonton. I would have stayed in Edmonton.
They do have quite a nice mall. I'll give them that.
Yeah, the mall, the river valley. Uh, there is a lot going on in Edmonton as well.
Yeah, definitely. So what would you say has brought you the greatest joy in your life here in Calgary?
Calgary is very, I would say, is very well organized, convenient city. As far as convenience, I would say, and for young families, I have two kids. Um, this the city is very efficient, clean, organized, and I would say it's quite international. I formed some friendships in here as well. that are harder to form once you get older and busier. Um, lots of immigrants as well, lots of newcomers, and definitely the nature, the proximity to the mountains make a big difference for recreation, I would say.
I do definitely love the mountains. That's something that I enjoy as opposed to my home in the States.
And I would say I would add to that the economy is quite vibrant in here. Income versus expenses, especially for housing, is quite favorable in Canada. So at some point, I was considering to moving to Vancouver um, about maybe 12 years ago, but just the cost of living in there was a lot higher.
I mean, yeah, I think Vancouver is one of the most expensive cities to live in the country. So nice to visit, not so nice to live in.
Yeah, you get to keep a lot less of your money.
All right. So, what have been some surprises about your life in Calgary or just in Canada in general?
So when I first arrived, um, I was just surprised how harsh the climate was. Uh, just I remember biking to school in May, and I arrived in February. And I thought that by May we would already have spring, summer, wearing shorts. But the wind was so fierce in there that it felt like there was 0 degrees outside in May, and I was just shocked. Like, when is this gonna end? Like, just, uh, just the sheer force of nature on the prairie. Um, and I also didn't realize how isolated the communities are. So Calgary, in a sense, is a big city. We have 1.5 million people here, but it's far away from any other major cities. It takes a day to drive to Vancouver. American cities are far, Seattle or Portland. They're far. It's just Edmonton and Calgary, and everything else you need to take an airplane.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that front. Because I'm so used to the States being a place where there are cities every hour or two, and then moving up here, it's like, well, there's Calgary, and then if you want, you can drive 3 hours to the next city.
Yeah, and Edmonton culture is not that different from Calgary, so it doesn't make as much sense to visit if you want variety. And this is something else that I found in Canada is that the culture is very young, so the culture is still forming. Like in Europe, everywhere you go, there is a lot more history and more variety, different languages, different. You can take 1 hour flight and can be in like 20 different countries. and each country has its own food, its language, and it's more the culture has found itself, I would say. As Canada, I mean, 100 years ago in here in Calgary, there was pretty much nothing, just cow breeders and some ranchers. So that was a bit of a surprise as well, right, to find that the culture was like young wine, still not as mature.
Yeah, definitely not as ready for sipping just yet. So, what about your home country in Ukraine do you miss the most?
Well, all of my family is there, so I came on my own, and my parents, my cousins, my sister, they're all there. So number one, I would say the family and relationships, and it's far away to travel. It takes the whole day. It takes like 25 hours, 24 hours to get there by flights, and then time zones, and tickets are not cheap. So you don't get to visit as often every couple of years. Um, so as far as family, it feels a bit isolated. And what else do I miss? Occasionally, food. The Ukrainian food. We get it here, There is a large Ukrainian community in Alberta on the prairies, but it's a Canadian Ukrainian food. It's not exactly Ukrainian food from Ukraine. It's adopted to Canadian tastes. So, like blood sausage, for example, that we eat is not as easy to find, because people don't really like it. It sounds weird, stuff like that, or meat jello, things like that. Something specialized. Also, land. The land is a little bit different. There is more leafy forests. In Canada, it's mostly coniferous forests, pine trees in here. As in Ukraine, you go in the forest and it's a little bit different feel in the nature.
Yes. Where I was from the States, there were a lot of oak and birch trees. So if you went hiking in the mountains, because I lived near the Appalachian Mountains, it was quite different from the ones you take here in the Rockies.
Exactly. And also missing fall, because in here the fall would just last sometimes 2 weeks. This year we've been blessed, it's been very long, and there are still some trees outside that have leaves, but usually it's over in October.
Yes! I miss fall so much. I wish it was longer, but what are you gonna do? Honestly, it just makes it more special when we can actually get to experience it like this.
Yeah, exactly. Fall and spring, the transition seasons.
All right, so moving on, how do you think your life is different from recent or past immigrant experiences in Calgary?
Well, I came to Canada at a very young age. I had the benefit of being 15, and at that time, the brain is like a sponge. It's very absorbent. And I went through educational system here. So I had that advantage of getting in early, as it's a bit harder when someone is, especially past 40, I would say. 20s, 30s, it's still easy to assimilate, but then after 40, I think it's an uphill, harder path. So I have that advantage, and what else? I came from a well-off family. Like I didn't have to struggle, and that helped me financially. So a lot of these people, they're on the margin. So some of them just came here with one suitcase. And I came with one suitcase as well, but that's all they had.
Yeah, I totally get that. I was lucky because we moved up here with my stepdad, who was already a Canadian citizen. So the permanent residency process was already kind of jump started for us.
Yes. Although the disadvantage is that it was a lot harder to immigrate in those times. Canada didn't take as many immigrants, so the requirements were a lot higher. The bar to pass, like it took me to get my high school, then to get university and 1 year experience in my field, and then applying. So it took me like 8 years before I became permanent resident. And now they have programs where someone can work for a year and speak a bit of English and apply for PR, specifically for Ukrainians fleeing the war, which is very generous of Canada. It's a great opportunity for them.
Oh, yeah, of course. So to sort of wrap up our interview here, what kind of advice would you give to those newly integrated to the city or thinking about immigrating to Canada?
So my advice would be look at different cities, look at different subcultures in Canada before choosing your city. Get familiarized with what Canada has to offer on a larger scale, because a lot of immigrants get settled in Toronto or Vancouver, since those cities are on the map, on the global map. Calgary is kind of not that well known. Maybe we need to host the Olympics to get on the map again. But to make a conscious choice, I think Alberta has a lot to offer. especially in opportunity, economic opportunities, comfort for families, and nature. Really, nature is amazing here. It's world class. Um, as far as culture go, I would advise newcomers to get to know um, other people from outside of their group. Get out and meet Canadians, meet other newcomers, speak English as much as you can. Don't just click with Ukrainians or Russian speaking people from former Soviet Union. Try to learn other customs, other people's history, where they come from, what they're about. That will make it a lot easier to integrate.
Perfect. Well, that was all of my questions. Thank you so much for speaking with me. It's been an honor. I hope you have a great rest of your day.